Comrades, before we start, we want to send support and solidarity to all those workers taking strike action, and we will hear from many of them today as well. And I just advertised the weekly NSSN bulletin that goes out with those disputes. I'd like to send solidarity to the GMB members on strike in the NHS in South London. They've started strike action today. Now, I know we've said this before, but really, this year's NSSN Conference, it really is a council of war, isn't it? We are in the midst of the biggest, broadest, and most prolonged strike wave for a generation. When we met last year, we anticipated the coming together of three main elements of this strike movement: localised disputes, strikes in national companies, and national ballots and action in the main areas of the public sector. And what have we seen? An uprising of workers. A new generation brought into action, fired by the most brutal cost of living squeeze in living memory. We salute them all, and you will hear from many of them today. Perhaps you are one of them yourselves. The NSSN have stood with them on the picket lines, and some we have huddled in the cold. We've got soaked together. We've sweltered in the sun. We've also danced on a few, and we've also had a little bit of grub as well on some of those picket lines. We have stood and we will stand with everyone, with the rail workers, the posties, the BT workers, the bin and bus workers, the Amazon workers, the cleaners, the teachers, the support staff, the lecturers, the college staff, the workers, the nurses, the junior doctors, the porters, the dockers, the workers from St. Mungo's, which you will hear about today, and many, many, many others. And yes, even the barristers, if you remember, who were out on strike last year. All of them, all those workers, key workers that worked through the COVID pandemic, risked their lives, and of course some of them who's tragically lost their lives. For those who said the union movement and the workers' struggle were dead and buried, then we've seen a recovery from the lowest strike figures in history. From 2017, where barely over 30,000 workers took strike action, to the depths of COVID, to a few days alone in the last 6 months, when up to over 500,000 workers took strike action together. Because actually what is happening is our workers and the unions are fighting and becoming a pole of attraction to the so-called, even amongst those perhaps seen as more prosperous professions, often drowned in student debt, who are joining the trade union movement, joining workers' struggle, and are downing tools. And what has been the response of the Tories? Not to negotiate properly or even to want to negotiate at all. But I tell you something, Sunak and co will rue the day when they refuse to talk to public sector workers, particularly the nurses, in November. Because as a result of that, the hundreds of thousands of RCN members walked out the first strike they've ever taken in their history in England and Wales. And we wish them well in their reballot to renew their strike mandate, which ended at midnight last night. We think, and they think, more can be won. But whatever is won, hundreds of thousands of nurses, in the first action they've ever taken, will have learned a valuable truth that all workers are learning, that action works, striking works, and gets results, even if it's not everything you want. Or in the immortal words of Bob Crow, who under his leadership, the RNT initiated the NSSN, we might not win, but if we don't fight, we will always lose. Not all the disputes that have happened have been successful, although many have. Workers, and you will think in this audience, that in some struggles, more could have been won. In this conference, we encourage you to have your say, to talk about the victories, to talk about the defeats, and to talk about the score draws as well. To raise praise, to raise criticism, because that's the way we share our experiences and learn from each other. Better be prepared for the next fight, because the next fight, comrades, is already here. We will hear from the workers who've travelled here almost direct from the picket line, and we will help them build solidarity. Take the details back to your union branch, back to your workplaces and your trades councils. But as I said, this is a council of war, because instead of negotiating, the Tories want to wield the stick with a new anti-union law on the back of decades of attacks on our unions, our union rights, and the right to strike. Within weeks, the minimum service level bill could be law, and unions represented in this room could face fines, and workers could be sacked if unions don't organise their own scabbing operations. Tell the 800 P&O workers from last year who the law favours. Rich or poor, bosses or workers, when the chief executive of P&O walked into Parliament and told MPs that admitted that he broke the law when they boarded ships with handcuffs to sack seafarers and threatened their families with poverty. Anyone heard of any senior P&O managers locked up and arrested or even fined? This is class law. This is class war. To protect bosses' profits by hamstringing unions as workers fight to keep a roof over our heads. It gives a weapon to employers, but they have no legal obligation to use it. And therefore we demand of Starmer, we demand of every Labour politician, where they're an employer, in cities like this one, in cities where some of you are living, in Wales, where Labour is the government, that they tell Sunak right now that they will not use this legislation. They will not abide by this legislation. Tell them today that you can bring this law in, but we will not abide by it. But we tell Starmer to go further, that if Labour is elected into office, that Labour should reinstate any worker sacked under this law and reimburse any union fined over this vicious minimum service level bill. Against this shambolic Tory government, it would make Sunak's law unworkable. Likewise, Starmer should promise to implement the policy passed at last year's Labour conference to renationalise Royal Mail. Can you imagine the help that would give the CWU in that dispute? But he is too interested in proving to big business that he is safe for them. He shouldn't go cap in hand to the banks threatening interest rate rises. He should be promising to nationalise them and take them into socialist public ownership. We don't want to nationalise them to prop them up like Brown did in 2008. We want them taken into socialist public ownership under workers' control. Then workers could have cheap mortgages. Now, we don't expect some of that to happen. But the Tories are rocking, aren't they? Since we met last year, the Tories are on their third Prime Minister, and the clock is ticking on Sunak. Boris has gone. Really gone? Well, really gone for now. Truss, remember her? Came and went very, very quickly. But don't kid yourself, for Sunak is any less cruel. On the day that the report into Johnson's Partygate was published, where was Sunak? On an horrible, vicious, anti-immigration raid in the early hours of the morning, trying to prove himself to that divide and rule tactics. Just like his small boats policy, this is crude, racist scaremongering. Divide and rule, Tory rule. But it's not migrants who are responsible for spiralling inflation, increasing our rents and mortgage payments through the roof. Our answer to the Tories and their further attack on our right to strike and their attempts at divide and rule is we fight together. Unity is strength. Comrades, we've seen over the last year our workers fighting together is the basis of class unity. And when we strike together, in our millions, our potential power can be decisive. We say, fight the Tory anti-union laws. No union, no worker left to fight alone. That's why we call on the TUC and the unions to come together now, right now, to be prepared for the mass joint action to defeat this weak and divided Tory government. That's why, again, we will be lobbying the TUC in September. We've booked the venue. We are coming to Liverpool in September. Come and join us at that stage. Because to defend our right to strike, to get the pay rise we deserve and need, we need all the unions to fight together. And let's be clear, that means to strike together. We saw the potential on the 1st of February. We saw the potential on Budget Day on the March of 15. Strikes of 500,000 plus. It showed our strength, and we may well need more. On the scale, if necessary, of a 24-hour general strike against the anti-union policies of this Tory government. Comrades, as we've done for the last 17 years, the NSSN will take our place in these great events. We will play the role we always have played. We give solidarity, we build support, but we also say what needs to be said. We have no illusions in a Starmer government, only demands, and a promise that we'll strike back against any cuts, whoever brings those cuts in. But if in the next weeks or months, this Tory Sunak government goes for our trade union movement, goes for any union, any worker, then this is a fight that we can't shy away from, but one that we can win. Solidarity.
Thanks, Rob. I'm very pleased to introduce Kaz, One Kazab, on behalf of Unite the Union.
Thank you, comrades, brothers and sisters. First of all, solidarity from our General Secretary, Sharon Graham, who can't be here, unsurprisingly, again, working on disputes, but that's exactly what we are about. Solidarity, but also solidarity and thanks. Thank you to the NSSN for the support shown to Unite members in dispute after dispute. Time and again, the NSSN banner, along with Rob, have been on our picket lines. And with over 600 separate disputes since the election of our General Secretary in August 2021, there have been plenty of picket lines to choose from. And that solidarity and that support have helped us win some 80% of those disputes. It is that solidarity, that support, that has ensured that they are real wins, wins totalling over 300 million in extra earnings for our members. Think of it as a transfer of wealth from the employers' bank accounts into the pockets of workers. It's a sharp, focused picture of what we are engaged in. A class struggle so that workers keep more of the wealth that they create. And of course, that is why the bosses class hate the public sector so much. If it doesn't create profit, it's no good to them. And I'll come back to that point in just a few minutes to highlight the lies and the hypocrisies of the Tories. But first of all, let's celebrate. Yesterday, workers at Mile Engine Systems announced that following a threat of strike action, they've won a 10.7% pay increase. Security officers at Heathrow, having taken strike action, have won pay increases of between 15.5 and 17.5%. And waste service workers at Welling and Hatfield Obasa have won pay increases of around 13.5% following all-out strike action. I'm not going to go through all 600 disputes. It is our duty, our fundamental duty, to make sure that no dispute is settled until those reps are reinstated and protected.
We know our members working in the food industry were struggling to put food on the table and survive back in 2021 when we ran our Right to Food survey back then. With the increase to energy and the rising cost of food, as well as everything else, working people are barely scraping by. And it's absolutely disgusting that in the UK, the 5th richest economy in the world, there are more food banks than Greggs and McDonald's stores.
Almost every sector, in fact, the only sector that hasn't been engaged in industrial action so far is our comrades in education, and they're about to start. We are in the throes of working up a ballot. So never before in NSSN's history have we had activity in absolutely every section of our union. And that has meant things have been extremely busy, but busy and successful. I'm pleased to say that we've had wonderful successes by comrades being on the picket lines in local government. We've won awards there and we've challenged the management side, and we've had great successes. We've also had success in health alongside comrades across water, in Unison, GMB and others, where we've taken action together and in concert with those unions.
Comrades, first of all, I bring you solidarity on behalf of NAPO and apologies from Ian Lawrence, our General Secretary, who wished for it to be a successful conference today. Now, last year when I spoke, we were in negotiations over a 3-year pay claim. The offer that came back, though it fell far short of the claim we submitted with Unison and the GMB, was accepted by each of our respective membership. So we will see what the negotiations, both in probation and in CAFCAS, will bring. I'll finish now, but to say, despite not having joined other workers already in struggle last year, our members are fed up being trampled on. And the likelihood of joining in with other workers in a fight against this government, knowing full well that the proposed vicious attacks on the right to strike is to stop the fight for decent working conditions and pay. So this could very well be on the agenda again for us in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks, Anushka. Now I want everybody to give a very warm welcome to Garfield, one of the shop stewards representing GMB members taking on the multinational Amazon in Coventry.
So regarding that now, then we've set up our plan of action. Initially, the pickets were 4-hour slots. Then it was decided that we go down to 2-hour slots. But based on what took place at the picket lines, we were able to recruit our membership in numbers of 40 or 60 during the day. So from 2022, where we had somewhere around 50 or so GMB members, by the time of the action, which has just finished recently this year, we now stand at 850 members on site. We've taken our second ballot in Coventry, and we now have another 6 months of strike action coming back. And the view is now that we'll try and chip away at the new hires. We don't begrudge the new hires because everybody's entitled to work, but how we see Amazon use this against us, it has caused major concern. So that's our plan of action. So I'm going to wrap up and leave you with that piece there, and thank you for listening to what I had to say.
The objective is to defend our jobs, conditions, pensions, pay now and improve them going forwards. And what that means is it's not enough to just say, we had a strike, we gave it a go. We don't want glorious defeats and a commemorative badge that we can look back on in years to come. What we need is victories, the defeat of the bosses and the maintenance of our jobs, pay and conditions. Task in front of us as trade unionists. We've got to defend our members on those day-to-day issues first and foremost. That will always remain the case. But we also have to look up, and we have to build a generalised resistance to this capitalist crisis and the attempt to make us pay for it. We need a generalised resistance that offers a political as well as an industrial alternative, because without that, we're in the position of the Coventry bin workers. We might win one day, but the next year you're back fighting the same thing again. We need to raise workers' sights. We need a different political alternative in front of people. We need a unified trade union movement behind that. I'm sure that all of you will be fighting for that within your respective unions. I hope that the RMT will continue to play a leading role in that process. Solidarity.